This list really shows the huge inflation transfer phase we've seen in recent years, with most of these buys being fairly recent and only one of them having proved themselves as undisputably worth their fee. It shows a trend of overpayment by the large English teams as of late. In this list we will look at the huge money moves and how they've panned out thus far. Definitely an interesting and perhaps surprising list given the names that appear. Here are the top 10 most expensive transfers in Premier League history. Number 10, Romelu Lukaku, 74.5 million, Everton to Manchester United. Ah yes, big Lukaku. The man who demands others call him world class, which is never a good sign.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Both a proven goal scorer and a guy who will drive his own fans mad, Lukaku is a hard player to rate. On the one hand, as I said, he has a huge upside, including a good goal record, pace, power and good positioning. But then he'll play a game where the ball just seems to bounce off him and back to the other team every single time. Terrible touch, feeble shots, and frankly demoralised teammates. His time at Old Trafford was a mixed bag, and in the end he was sold to Inter Milan having been deemed not good enough to lead the line for Manchester United. However, outside the last little bit of good football being squeezed out of Cristiano Ronaldo or Zlatan Ibrahimovic, United haven't really seen a number 9 scoring consistently since Lukaku. Perhaps this summer they will finally find their next top striker for years to come. One thing we can say for sure is Lukaku was not ultimately the answer. Number 9, Jadon Sancho, 74.8 million, Dortmund to Manchester United. It's so strange to think back on how United fans seem to believe that the answer to their team with poor centre midfield options and no strong centre-back partnership was to spend big on another winger. And yet it's exactly the attitude we saw from many a fan and pundit alike when it came to Jadon Sancho. A statistical monster in Germany. The young winger went from a surplus to requirements in Manchester City's youth academy to one of the most expensive signings in recent Premier League history, with Dortmund showing once again that they are very, very good at developing young talent. Sadly for Jadon, the excitement of his signing has given way to confusion, given game after game of anonymous performances. Far too often he seems to be substituted at 60 minutes with the response of, "Wait, Sancho was playing?" He's very close to being labelled as a pure flop at this point, and he'll need to revive the form that saw him be so sought after during his time at Dortmund. If he doesn't, it's hard to imagine United won't look to sell him while they can still recoup some of that huge transfer fee. Number 8, Virgil van Dijk, 75 million, Southampton to Liverpool. Here we have the one guy on the list who is proven to be worth the money. How good Virgil is as an individual defender is really up for debate, as I, a half Dutch man, has seen him look extremely weak in certain situations for the Netherlands, most notably losing men he's marking in crossing situations. That said, in the role he's given to do at Liverpool, with the team's aggressive pressing leading to a high defensive line that plays to his strengths, he's been absolutely fantastic overall for the Reds. It's not just his own talents, but his qualities as a leader that make Van Dijk so special. He possesses that magical ability great players have to make their own teammates better. It's no coincidence that Liverpool's second centre-back always seems to look good when playing next to Van Dijk, yet invariably struggles when Virgil's injured. Given the impact he's had on the club, it would be ridiculous to suggest that he has not been an overwhelming success. Number 7, Harry Maguire, 80 million, Leicester to Manchester United. All hail his magnificent fridginess, glory be to his name. In all honesty, I'm running out of things to say about this. Maguire's ceaseless string of calamitous performances for United seems to have ended up with him becoming a meme. Heralded as the saviour to United's defensive struggles when he arrived from Leicester for a whopping £80 million, to say he hasn't lived up to the billing is a bit like saying the Titanic had a suboptimal maiden voyage. A classic example of the English media massively overrating one of their own. It's more amusing to think that people still try to claim he's secretly good somehow. I swear I saw him in some newspaper's team of the tournament at the last World Cup. Stop it. Get some help. Number 6, Anthony, 86 million, Ajax to Manchester United. Man, United fans were looking for way too much from this guy. Anthony to me is a classic example of a player who was made better by the team around him. At Ajax, he was put in positions where his teammates were playing really good through balls to his runs and creating space for him to cut in on his left foot inside the box and try to create something. He was free to try and make things happen with the understanding that he may give the ball away, but he could also score from very little on his day. Being given the ball in far deeper positions at United, being expected to stretch the defence by running at them, we see some of his flaws on show rather than his strengths. He's not very quick for a winger, often having to come backwards to keep possession instead of threatening to run past his marker. Given the greater physicality of the Premier League, his lack of pace and strength are more of a pressing issue. He's not particularly strong crosser of the ball, nor does he have a particularly good long shot. Given this, he struggled to have a similar impact at Old Trafford when compared to his days at Ajax. Perhaps in the future, once Ten Hag has had more time to truly mould United to play his vision of football, we will see the best of Anthony once again. For now, it's hard not to fear that he'll be labelled a flop in a few years' time. Number 5, Mikhailo Mudryk, 89 million, Shakhtar to Chelsea. In the interest of honesty, my first version of this list didn't have Mudryk in it. You may say this list is objective, and based on money paid for a player, how could you not have him? Well, my answer is quite simple. I forgot he existed. When Arsenal looked to be paying nearly 80 million for the relatively unknown player, it raised many eyebrows. Still a young prospect, many felt he hadn't done enough to become worthy of such a price tag, and Arsenal had been burned on Nicolas Pepe not long before. Enter Chelsea, who care not for the worries of mere mortals, and proceed to gazump Arsenal and landing the Ukrainian winger for the slightly staggering fee of 89 million, denying him the move of his dreams to the team he seemed to like every social media post of. While he shows some basic promise with pace and the drive to take people on, it's fair to say Chelsea have paid a lot for potential here, and only time will tell if it was a good call. Number 4, Paul Pogba, 89.5 million, Juventus to Manchester United. Yet more United players on this list. This is why I can't help but laugh at all these screams that the club aren't spending enough on transfers. The money is not the problem, it's who you're buying. Yet we'll still hear every summer about how United need to invest in the squad. Since Sir Alex left, United have spent fortunes on players. You have never seemed to get away from the idea that they just need to spend more money and the problems will all go away somehow. Annoyingly, Ten Hag has seemingly finally gotten a grip on the squad and is making good decisions. Please stop that. I prefer the bad United. Speaking of spending huge money on guys who aren't worth it at all, enter Paul Pogba. This is yet another player I'm running out of ways to talk about, so let's do this. Pogba was supposed to have an impact like Drogba. He was brought to be a vital cogba, but most games he couldn't even be bothered to jogba, stuck in place like a bogba. Then managers would drop him to the bench and sometimes from the squadba. United's midfield was so poor fans wished they could see him. Fogba. After one good performance, people would treat him like Godba. He'd then score a goal and jump around like a frogba before giving the badge a snogba. Now he's the best mid in the world again if you listen to the blogba. And after a couple of good moments, leave them a gogba, seemingly blind to the inevitable return of plodba. Soon he's back to standing still like a logba and pointing at his teammates to run for him like here's a dogba. Additionally, his agent was a sodba, and they both disrespected the club and left without so much of a nodba. In summary, Pogba wasn't very Pogba. Number 3, Romelu Lukaku, 99.2 million, Inter Milan to Chelsea. Part 2, Lukaku won't be the answer again, Boogaloo. The sequel was funnier than the original, and it's up to you whether I mean his signing versus being signed at United, or the fact that this is the second time he's been signed by Chelsea. Chelsea originally bought the Belgian as a raw youngster back in 2011. Having been sent on loan a few times, it was decided that Lukaku would not develop into Chelsea's #1 striker. He was sold to Everton in 2014, becoming a dependable striker for them before being signed by Manchester United. You may remember from early in the list. We rejoin our friend Romelu in 2021. Having done well since moving from United to Inter Milan, it was somewhat surprising to see Chelsea sign him again for nearly £100 million. After a strong first few games, things went downhill quickly. Between some terrible performances and publicly speaking out against the club, his second time at Chelsea was destined to be a short one. He was loaned back to Inter 1 year after being bought for £100 million, and has since said he will never go back to Chelsea. While I'm sure Al wouldn't find this funny, I really do. Number 2, Jack Grealish, 103 million, Aston Villa to Manchester City. Manchester City were crying poverty in the summer of 2022, with manager Pep Guardiola claiming that the market for strikers was simply too expensive. This was in relation to the pursuit of Tottenham star man Harry Kane. These claims were then made an absolute laughingstock, as City spent an at the time British record fee on Aston Villa's Jack Grealish, a player in a position where their squad was already strong with the likes of Riyad Mahrez, Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, Raheem Sterling. Undoubtedly the talisman of the Villa side, Grealish is again somewhat the victim of being asked to play an entirely different style. He was the main man at Villa, with the onus on him to run at players to the ball in order to create things for the team. If he lost the ball, it wasn't that big a deal, as next time he may create something special. At City, there's far more onus in keeping the ball, leading to a direct contrast with Jack's talents, namely dribbling, in order to try and force opportunities. Not being the best natural fit for the way City play has led to Grealish seeing limited time thus far, failing to live up to the impact expected of a £100 million player. For a couple of honourable mentions, we have 70.7 million for Wesley Fofana, Leicester to Chelsea. Not the only player we talked about today who I didn't know much about when he first signed for a massive fee. Fofana seemed to have played for Leicester once or twice before Chelsea decided to spend huge money on him, for reasons mainly known to them. I'd like to be honest in this channel, and my honest summation is I don't know enough about the guy to say much. Save that it's a bit odd to pay so much for someone who is not had a huge impact to this point and seems pretty injury prone. Maybe he becomes the best centre back in the world to prove me wrong, but at the moment it's 70 million on an unproven prospect, which seems expensive to say the least. Nicolas Pepe, 72 million Lille to Arsenal. This'll never stop being funny for me. The reason is that Saka was in your youth academy, and you spent 72 million on a guy in his position who's worse than him. This kind of stuff gets you relegated in lower leagues where efficient use of money matters. Luckily for Arsenal, this is the Premier League, and the rich teams can throw money down the toilet relatively unpunished. Speaking of which, potentially, number 1, Enzo Fernandez, 106 million Benfica to Chelsea. Who, the most expensive player in British football history, can be described best as a guy who ran about so Messi didn't have to. I don't think anyone, including the player's agent, the player's wife, and the player's mum would argue this isn't too much money for the current stature in world football that Fernandes has. Having only arrived from River Plate to Benfica in the summer, Chelsea capped off their preposterous January window with the Argentinian for over 5 times what he cost Benfica in the summer. Enzo may end up being a decent signing for Chelsea in the long run, but the money they paid, you'd expect one of the best in the world, and you can put me down as a doubter on that front.
I don't know, man.
So there you have it, the top 10 most expensive signings in Premier League history as of January 2023. It seems likely we'll have a few places taken by summer 2023 signings. Let's hope they are for players who are a little more worthy in general, shall we? With that said, don't forget to join the clan, do all the likes and clicks and I don't know, pay 100 million for me.